Hey, maggots. Today I have for you the story of a supernatural bank heist gone wrong, a peculiar camp with some very strange rules, and a lover's holiday gets interrupted by a mysterious creature. Welcome to the Frail Blaze. Our first story is called A Locked Box Mystery. The press called it the great locked box mystery of our age. A man, naked, had snuck past 10 security guards, 100 cashiers, an array of CCTV cameras, and found himself in the vaults of the Bank of England with £3 million of diamonds secreted up his back passage. For Richard Grzesko, it began with a sneeze. Going to the bathroom for a tissue, he paused. Something was not right. The mirror. He was not there. Well, of course he was there because he knew he was, and he was seeing with his own eyes, even if what they were seeing was a t-shirt floating in mid-air. He waved his hand in front of his face. There was nothing. Richard ordered a pizza, and when the driver arrived, he opened the door and stood completely naked. "Hello?" the driver said tentatively. Richard instinctively covered his tackle. But no, the driver was looking straight through him. The problem became how to turn off the power. He went to the bathroom, plucked a nose hair, sneezed, and he was re-embodied. His neighbor, Jenny, was a 25-year-old Pilates instructor. Before he discovered his ability, he'd watch her through a peephole. He didn't have to make do with this piecemeal voyeurism anymore. Oh no. He slid in behind her before she closed the door. She dumped her gym bag, removing her vest and leggings, unaware she was being observed by a naked, middle-aged man. He stood a few meters away and disgraced himself. Upon climax, the girl looked over in total horror. Had he been seen? No. But that is how he learned when something leaves his body, it doesn't maintain the cloak of invisibility. Oh dear. Then the ghost hunters came. Unbeknownst to Richard, the girl had a camera, and that feed showed the ectoplasm appearing from out of nowhere. A second incident occurred. A woman living on the first floor was followed by a floating device. That time, Richard had forgotten to remove his wristwatch. He grew more brazen, even with the paranormalists around. He hit the streets naked as the day he was born and observed anyone or anything that attracted his attention. He went to the homes of celebrities, sitting in on conversations and selling the information to newspapers. And then came his idea for the Bank of England. It was a chilly day, but Richard's body had grown used to the elements. He walked through the doors, waited for access to the lower levels, and proceeded. What he had not realized was that the vault door could not be opened from within. Slowly, painfully, he put the diamonds inside of himself. But then the air began to grow thinner. So thin that he eventually was no longer able to breathe, and he collapsed, the booty in his booty. And that is how they found him. His powers switched off as soon as he expired. The tapes were pored over by the police, but the only anomalous thing was the mysterious cloud of condensed air drifting through the bank. Yet there could be no breath without a breather. and the case remained unsolved. That is, until now. Greed. How it always follows power, doesn't it? Well, can't say Richard was a nice fellow who didn't deserve it. But let me know what you thought in the comments beneath. I suppose you've been good enough, so I'll give you a story 2 now. This one is called Camp Everlight. Welcome to Camp Everlight, where every day is an adventure, and the nights are just as thrilling. First off, congratulations on being selected. It's quite an exclusive experience. Not everyone gets to join us. There are rules, however. Rule number 1. Always wear your camp badge. It's not just for show, it lets us know that you're one of us. Misplace it, and, well, you might find yourself on an unexpected detour. Rule number 2. Stick to the lighted paths at night. The darkness is different here. It has a way of changing things, or should I say revealing them. Rule number 3. Attend all meal times, but never take the last piece of anything. Trust us, it's for your own good. Hunger takes on new meanings in these parts. Rule number 4. Never, under any circumstances, enter the woods after midnight. The woods are special. They're older than the camp, older than you can imagine. They don't take kindly to visitors, and they have a way of keeping things or people. This camp is sounding quite interesting. Rule number 5. Participate in all camp activities. Resistance isn't just futile, it's discouraged. You'll find that obedience brings its own rewards, while defiance, well, let's just say that it's not recommended. Rule number 6. The lake. It's beautiful, isn't it? Strange way to start a rule. Just don't look too closely at what's beneath the surface. And absolutely no swimming after sundown. The things in the lake, they get lonely. They might decide that you are their new best friend. Rule number 7. Please ignore the screaming. You'll hear things at night, but it's just the wind, or the trees, or the whispers of those who walked the paths before you. Listening too closely might invite conversations that you are absolutely not ready to have. Rule number 8. Enjoy your stay here at Camp Everlight. Your arrival here was no accident. It was by the choices you made long after you were made aware of this place. Or, for some, you were lured here by forces beyond your understanding to play a role in a story much older than time itself. So, there are no exit privileges. And hey, it's not the heat of your eternal damnation that gets you. It's the humidity. I don't consider myself an expert on these matters, but I don't think they're talking about a summer camp. Though, when fires are near, I guess it never truly does get dark, does it? Much like Camp Everlight. But let me know what you thought in the comments. And I suppose I'll give you your third. I don't want to hear you beg. It's pathetic and unappealing to my ears. This story is called I Saw Her Dancing with Him. This will probably get me into trouble if I name names. Her family is looking for her, and the last thing they want is the guy she was dating to be telling stories that paint a different picture from the one that they want to tell the police. For that reason, my name is John, and her name is Sarah. I own a holiday home where there's usually a lot of snow. The week I took her up there was one of the warmer times. The only ice one would see is on the nearby mountains, and maybe a few frosted windows early in the morning. It was the kind of cold that made you want to stay in bed in the morning, no matter what had to be done. And that's one of the reasons I took us there, and not some hotel by the sea. We'd always be going and doing something instead of enjoying each other's company indoors. Something we hadn't done in a long time. Considering work and distance between us, nothing a warm fireplace in a secluded house couldn't fix. The drive there was long and a little uncomfortable. The sun had fallen, so I turned on the lights and settled in for a slower, more careful drive. "So, you're not speaking to me now?" I said. Sarah flexed her fingers and examined her nails. She must have regretted that attempt at casual indifference because she stuffed her hand back in her sleeves and gave a little shiver in reply. "You're not so young that you can get away with the childish behavior like that anymore," I chimed. She looked at me slowly with wide eyes. "You did not just fucking say that," she said with a tremble of anger. "Much better," I said, placing my hand on her knee and squeezing it for a moment. "Now, how about telling me what I did wrong?" "Well, if you don't—" "Sarah," I interrupted, "we're fast becoming a cliché if you're going to say the same things." "You're an asshole. You think you know everything, don't you?" she replied. "Here we go," I sighed. What followed was the usual back and forth. I enjoyed every minute of it. It also made the drive pass by quicker, not that I got tired of seeing asphalt, frosted glass, and frigid trees in the headlights. Occasionally, we passed another car slowly making its way between towns. There was one that followed us for a good long while, with their blinding lights on in my mirrors. But luckily, I turned off the main road and went down a dirt road leading towards my holiday home soon after. I looked at their car in my rear-view mirror as I drove and cursed them out. "Temper, temper, John," Sarah chimed. "Don't you temper me," I growled. "I thought we were going to have a relaxing holiday weekend," she continued teasingly. "So far, it's as relaxing as a trip to the dentist." "Well, let me tell you—" I stopped myself and took a deep breath. I knew she was just trying to get a rise out of me. I knew she meant well. Sometimes she was just too damn good at it. "Tell you what, if a dentist is on your mind, we can play doctor when we get there." "Oh?" Sarah smiled, falling into a happy silence. I could see the shape of my holiday house in the distance. Against the dark blue gaps between the silhouettes of trees was a blocky shape of a 2-story house that had absolutely everything. Large windows, comfortable furniture, modern kitchen, 12 large empty rooms full of everything we could possibly need for a relaxing holiday. I gave her a slow tour once we arrived inside. We got our things from the car. I unpacked the food in the kitchen while she took care of the clothes. I wandered around the place again after that, just to make sure everything was in place. More specifically, I stopped in the living room. I eyed the fireplace, hearing a low whoosh of air that had traveled down the chimney. Starting a fire late at night seemed like a silly idea, but I was in a silly mood. Strangely, it did feel a little warm already. I figured it was because the living room had all that warm furniture, or maybe Sarah had kicked the heaters into overdrive. I heard the fireplace whistle again as a stiff breeze swept over the house. I approached one of the windows and peeked through the gap in the curtains at the dirt road leading up to the place. I could see a glittering of dew on the grass in the moonlight. The stars were clear for all to see, another plus of being in the countryside. If it weren't so cold, I would have stepped out with Sarah to admire them, turn on that romantic charm, and pretend I knew a few constellations. I closed the curtain and smiled to myself. Satisfied with my look around the bottom floor, I turned off the lights in the kitchen and went up to see Sarah. She was waiting for me. Sleep was easy. The bed covers were heavy and warm. Sarah was laying against me, my head half sunk into the cushy pillow, and the bedroom was filled with the room temperature air from the heater. It was lazy bliss. Only, I'm not a young man anymore, and I woke up in the night with an urgent need to go to the washroom. Reluctantly, I climbed out of the bed. After finishing in the ensuite bathroom, I was thirsty. Sarah had woken up as well. I told her that I was going to the kitchen. She moaned something about shutting the door behind me before yawning, and she fell back asleep. It was a slow descent down the stairs. I didn't turn on the lights because I wanted to see if I could reach the bottom without them, but it just made it so much more frustrating. For a moment, my heart jumped when I saw a flicker of a shadow. I paused near the bottom of the stairs, trying to understand what it was that I'd seen. My heart skipped into a faster beat, but my mind was unsure as to why. I guess it is a natural reaction for anybody to be scared when they're in the dark and encounter something unknown. Did a coat rack by the door scare me? Was my imagination playing tricks on me? What the hell happened, and why did I feel so threatened? By the time I made it to the kitchen, I dropped the thoughts completely. I poured myself a glass of water and sipped at it. Once my dry mouth and throat were wet enough, I drank down greedy gulps and wiped my mouth with my forearm. A tiny light caught my eye for a moment, and I glanced up into the corner of the room. My security camera. I forgot I had set it up all around the house and outside as well. Every room had a camera. Security was something I was very careful about in my early days. When I bought the holiday house, I was thinking to myself that someone could break in and steal everything, or squat in the attic like I had heard about in the papers. Just about anything could happen when I was away for months at a time, maybe even years. I had an app on my phone, though, and I could check the cameras at any time. My phone was in the bedroom, though. Before I could even hit the kitchen lights to go back, I heard a whisper of wind. I knew it had come from the living room fireplace, but it sounded a lot louder than it should have. A lot closer, too. I found myself getting a closer look, using the light pouring into the hallways to help me find my way to the living room. I think that's when it started, truly. I find myself doing things without actually really wanting to do them. I wanted to put the empty glass away, or in the sink, but I carried it with me. I wanted to turn on the light in the hallway, but I did not. I just walked straight into the living room. I stopped by the couch and looked at the fireplace. I heard the whisper, the distant echo of something human. I heard the sound of cloth being dragged. Sarah appeared beside me, a blanket draped around her body. She seemed half awake, but was just as interested in the sound coming from the fireplace as I was. Part of me was glad she was hearing this as well, so I turned back to the fireplace, not knowing what to expect. I stood there for a long time. I think it was several hours. Everything was drained from me. The fireplace no longer whispered, as it had said its messages hours ago. But still, I stood there. slam. It came out of nowhere and made me jump. I bashed my knee on the sofa in front of me and hissed. When I tried to grab my knee, I dropped the glass that I had been holding. It bounced off the couch, landed in front of the fireplace, and smashed into pieces, scattering shards all around. I turned around to where the sound had come from, and I saw that I was alone. Sarah was nowhere in sight. I hobbled into the hallway, quickly getting used to the pain, and stopped outside the door. I saw it, the same thing which made me pause on the stairs. It was a shadow underneath of the doorway, something I didn't really focus on, but this time I noticed it for sure, and my mind remembered seeing it before. A cool light was momentarily interrupted by a very human shadow. Sarah's shadow. It couldn't have been more than 5 seconds between when I saw that shadow and I opened the door, but when I did, I only saw the empty night and a discarded blanket. I didn't hear any running or the sounds of a car engine. She couldn't have moved that fast. And yet, she did. I saw Sarah at the edge of the woods. I saw a hand slip over her pale shoulder and guide her further in. I didn't know what to think at first. I saw her willingly, silently walking into the woods with someone. It didn't make any sense. She barely had any clothes on, and it was icy cold. I just couldn't think straight at all. I grabbed a coat from the coat rack and shoved my feet into a pair of boots. As ridiculous as I must have looked, it didn't matter. I couldn't waste another second, so I had to chase after them. I entered the same point of the tree line where they did, using the natural light of the sky and the moon to help me find my way. It wasn't easy. My legs were already being scratched to hell, and the low-hanging branches gave my head a few cuts and bruises. Trying my best to catch up was only slowing me down, so I decided to run at a more even pace. It was easy enough to spot Sarah's pale form in the darkness, but the stranger who she was with was as dark as the inkiest shadow. His shape was hidden by a large cloak, and his head was covered with a huge mass of messy hair. It could have been a woman, but something told me that it wasn't. Every time I lost sight of them, even if it was for the briefest of moment, they would jump ahead a few meters. Every tree that blocked them from view ended up putting them so far ahead of me that it didn't feel like I was catching up at all. It was a surreal nightmare where I was running but getting absolutely nowhere. Yet I was conscious, and that made the experience all the more terrifying. I lost sight of them one more time, and they jumped so far ahead of me that they were out of the forest and standing in a clearing beyond. I kept them in view by taking the hard path and crawling over bushes and under branches. It worked. The two didn't disappear again, but they also weren't even going anywhere. I saw them moving, but they weren't walking away. I stopped walking just to look at them. Sarah and the stranger were looking at each other and turning around each other. They were holding hands and making flowing gestures. They were dancing, a twirling dance, and in the light of the moon I could see the stranger clearly now. He was tall, maybe over 7 feet tall, and he was draped in a black robe and cloak. It held onto his lanky form, sagging in many places, as if his body and limbs were as thin as wires. His hands were gloved and small. His head was covered in that messy hair that I mentioned earlier, but there were 2 peaks of white bone, horns protruding from his head. As they danced, the horns grew larger and darker until they were twisted black goat horns. The man twisted again, blocking Sarah from view with his size. It was only a split second, but as he moved out of the way, Sarah was no longer there. The creature was dancing by himself, growing darker and darker even in the bright moonlight, until he blended in with the shadows of the trees and mountains behind him. He then disappeared. I walked out of the forest towards the spot where they had danced. It was empty, but I could see footprints. Sarah's footprints, but not the creature's. And yet, the grass they had danced on lacked the glitter of dew, pulled away by the black robes the creature wore. It was the last piece of evidence that they had existed, and it was fading quickly. I turned on the spot, looking towards the trees with a cold, empty heart. I knew that I was going to lose when I ran into that forest. I knew it every time they jumped ahead of me when I lost sight of them. By the time it had registered, though, I was already broken. I checked the cameras. It showed Sarah leaving the house, but there was no stranger in sight. Not even when I checked the time that something had crossed in front of me when I was descending the stairs. Most strangely, I didn't seem to leave the house. On camera, I simply stood there, bobbing from side to side as I stared at the fireplace. I called the police and explained to them what happened. I won't go into the legal matters that followed too much, but as you can imagine, I was the prime suspect. But with no evidence of anything whatsoever, and footage showing Sarah leave as if under some kind of trance, some aspects of my story were believed, but twisted to fit the story invented by some detectives. I think the final conclusion was that the heaters in the house must have leaked some kind of toxic chemical that affected both of our minds. It was an easy explanation for my story and the weird way that she had left the house so neatly, quietly, and trance-like. So, that is the story that the law accepted. Sarah's parents didn't believe it, and they blamed me. But without any evidence to suggest foul play, they just couldn't do anything, no matter what they told the police. I can't blame them for how they feel. In their position, I might think the same. Yet, I can only think about things from my own perspective. And I'm not about to question what I saw with my own two eyes. Even if the camera footage disagrees with me, I know what I saw. She did not walk away. She was taken. And she wasn't alone. I saw her dancing with him. Tragic tale. I wonder what that creature was. If you have any ideas, please let me know. But that's your 3 for this time. So glad you could have joined me. Oh, and subscribe already. And I do hope that you'll join me in the future for more Frail Blaze tales.